Assalamualaikum. Good morning, good day, everyone. My name is Haliza. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this exciting session where we will dive into a topic that is crucial to the future of academic publishing, open access. Today, we are honored to have with us a distinguished speaker from SpringNature, a global leader in scientific research publishing. Our presenter, Dr. Antoine Becquet, did I get it right? Yes. Serves as the Managing Director of SpringNature, Japan, Vice President for Japan, Southeast Asia, and Oceania. Our speaker, better known to many as Dr. Tony, which is easier to pronounce, is a highly respected leader in the academic publishing world, and he will be sharing valuable insight into SpringNature open access transition. With a wealth of experience and knowledge in driving innovation within the publishing industry, Dr. Tony will guide us through the company's effort in making scientific knowledge more accessible and challenges and opportunities in this transition presents for researchers. Without further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Tony as he presents SpringNature, our OA transition.
Good. It's a bit easier if I walk around. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. It is very, very nice to be here in Johor Bahru today, and my great pleasure to present about SpringNature's transition to open access. Just start the slides. Thank you. Could I get the next slide, please? Thank you. So at SpringNature, we're a major academic publisher. We've been around for a long time. Our roots go back to the formation of Springer in 1849 and the formation of Nature in 1869. So we've been around for about 180 years. And if you were to describe our mission in the world in a single sentence, it is really to accelerate solutions and discovery of those solutions to the world's most urgent challenges. And one of the ways that we can achieve this division in recent times is through the adoption of open science and open access. If I could get the next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. Sorry, I've got very little time, so I'm going to go through this very quickly. Okay, so as I said, SpringNature has been around since 1842 in one form or another, and we have many key milestones that you can see on the screen there, publishing major works and major journals. But I just wanted to point out that in recent times, some of our major achievements are based around open science and open access. So this includes publishing or acquiring one of the very first open access publishers in Biomed Central, and also launching what is now the largest journal in the world that is published also open access, which is Scientific Reports. And as you can see, we've also been a major publisher of open access books, having published more than 3,000 open access books now. And we've surpassed more than 1 million open access articles. So SpringNature is a real pioneer in open access models, and also in the way to achieve that through transformative agreements. If I could get the next slide, please. So the world's greatest challenges really require that science is open to everybody. This means that research becomes immediately reusable and available. It means that not just the research articles, but the research data behind that should be made available as quickly as possible so that other researchers can build on that achievement and advance scientific discovery at a great pace. So you can say that open access does several things, including it creates a faster and more effective research system, which then is available at scale. It builds an equitable research landscape. So no matter where you're located and what your resources are, you have access to that research. It protects and enhances research integrity by making reproducibility easier and making up all of the parts of research available. And of course, it helps us solve the world's greatest challenges, particularly in those areas that are defined by the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So open science really is a way for people to advance science quickly and also to do this in an efficient and cost-effective way along the way. And particularly for a country like Malaysia, it really provides great benefits in the fact that the world's research would be available quickly and immediately and openly. If I could get the next slide, please. So open science is not just about the articles, though. It's also very important that open science contains the data, and also all of the elements of the research process should also be made open. So when we talk about open science, we're not just talking about open access, we're also talking about open protocols, the methods, the lab notebooks. We're talking about open metrics, open code, and ways to create trust and openness in science along the way. And as I've just mentioned, this produces all the benefits that you can see here. So while today we're really going to be talking about the articles, it's also important to remember that behind those articles are all of the processes of research that also need to be made open at the same time. And SpringNature is working on ways to help the community do that. If I could get the next slide, please. Okay, so I've put up here a lot of benefits that open access finds for researchers and institutions. And many of these have been referred to before and are quite well known. We know, of course, that research articles usage greatly expands to more than 6 times what we find for articles that are behind a paywall. Eventually, we do see increased citations for those articles. At the moment, it's about 1.5 times the number that can be measured. But we do see a definite trend that articles that are made open more quickly do cite very well. Also, we talked about research becoming reproducible and available, increasing the trust in that research, and also makes the research more equitable. And this is particularly true for interdisciplinary research areas, which will require access to research across a range of research disciplines. So outside the small silos that are working within that research. And open science produces a path for innovation, for real-world companies. It also makes that research more impactful for the general public and for governments and policymakers that need to access that research to make decisions that will benefit on the benefits for the people and for the general public. So we do see that open access provides a real economic boost as well and a real benefit for growth. Recently, the Australian chief scientist released a report that suggested that in the context of Australia alone, making all of Australian research open access would provide a benefit of over 4 billion Australian dollars for the economy. And so independent research has also shown that open access provides economic benefits for the country. Could I get the next slide, please? Okay, so how do we achieve open access, particularly in the context of libraries and the research that's produced in universities? So the first thing is, of course, there are different ways to achieving open access that have been around for many years. The most common, and as you can see from the graph, the type of open access that is increasing the fastest is what we call gold open access. So gold open access is where, rather than libraries paying subscription, authors will pay an article publishing charge or an APC to make their article fully open. But the greatest growth in gold open access is now actually being pushed by libraries themselves, not through individual researchers. Using transformative agreements, libraries are able to repurpose the funds that they have traditionally spent on subscription research, on providing subscriptions to support researchers, to not only getting the access to the material, but by also being able to publish that material fully open access. So that's what a transformative agreement achieves. moving from a subscription agreement where you're only purchasing the right to read the articles, a transformative agreement gives you the right to not only read the articles, but to publish in the same journals, completely open access at no extra charge. So the APCs that are paid by individual researchers are no longer required because the library funding is able to provide all of those services in a single package. And you can see that transformative agreements have become increasingly popular, and that has led to more and more gold open access. Could I get the next slide, please? And here we can see some global trends. So the blue line is the articles that are still published behind a paywall or closed access, and the orange line is those that are published open. And you can see on the left-hand side, the global trend is about 50-50. So about 50% of the world's research is now already provided open access. And in Malaysia, we can already see a similar trend where open access is increasing. But a lot of this also is coming through self-funded open access through authors paying in a variety of journals. So definitely the trend is for open access to increase. And if we can go to the next slide. And as I mentioned, a lot of this is achieved through transformative agreements. So SpringNature started the first transformative agreement in 2014 in the Netherlands. And since then, it has grown to become the most common way that libraries access and publish research on behalf of their researchers in Europe, where legally, of course, research is required to be made open. But the concept of a transformative agreement is expanding rapidly in places like the United States and more recently in Asia as well. So I'll give you the example of Japan. Japan, transformative agreements were really started by the big libraries in universities. So in 2022, a group of about 10 universities, the largest universities in Japan, their libraries started to talk to publishers, completely independent of the government, about a way to bring transformative agreements to Japan. So for SpringNature, we started with those 10 universities. That grew to more than 20 in the following year, and actually more than almost 40 in the following year, I beg your pardon. And probably in next year, it will grow to about half of the research universities in Japan. And this has been entirely led by the university libraries leading the push for greater open access in Japan. I'll show you some data about that at the moment. In the region, of course, we find that Australia and New Zealand converted completely to transformative agreements in 2022. And now, for SpringNature, about 80% of their articles are published fully open access through a transformative agreement with the CALL consortium. So I wanted to point out that transformative agreements can be led by libraries. In fact, it is essential that the role of libraries is recognized because it is the funding that comes through libraries that has supported this transformation to open science and all the benefit that it brings. And I think one can argue that the greatest benefit from open science doesn't come to the individual researcher. Yes, that researcher's research can get looked at most widely, but it most benefits the institution and the country because it is the research of that institution and of the country that is the greatest advertisement for the progress of that institution or the country in the world. And so it is very much a great foresight for the various libraries around Asia that have pushed for transformative agreements with publishers. If I go to the next slide. And you can see this total number of publications that are published under TAs has grown rapidly. And now this is around 261,000 articles. So in 5 years ago, there were only 34 transformative agreements in the whole world. Now for SpringNature, there are more than 850 agreements in more than 70 countries with more than 60 publishers. And so a transformative agreement really has become the standard way that research communication happens both for reading research and publishing research. If I go to the next slide. And when this happens, when transformative agreements happens successfully, we see quite an incredible thing happening. We see that the research completely flips from closed to open. And as a result, we see a substantial increase in the usage and the visibility of that research. So in the UK, which flipped in around 2016, we see that the research has grown, that the usage of UK research has grown more than 10 times since the adoption of transformative agreements. And in Germany, we see a similar trend. And for the universities in California, for the California Digital Library System in the US, we see a similar trend. So when transformative agreements happen successfully, they can flip an entire country's research output to becoming completely open. And if we go to the next slide, please. There is still a long way to go, though. I mean, one can often say, look, if all research is made open, then we don't need the libraries to be involved anymore. Unfortunately, despite the great progress in transformative agreements and open science, a lot of the world's research is still behind a paywall. So for SpringNature, we still see, despite growth in the open part, there's still growth in the closed research, and we still see about 83% of the articles are still behind a paywall. So a very important part of your transformative agreement is still to provide the read access to all of the research that is still behind a paywall. So transformative agreement provides both the access to the read portion and allows you to publish open. And if we go to the next slide, please. So you might think, okay, we see a huge increase in usage of these open articles. Well, who is actually reading this research and why is that important? Because we know for individual researchers, they often know who is reading their research, and they will often make sure that they share an article with their friends and their collaborators and their competitors to make sure they go to conferences. They meet the people that are important to them to read their research. So what is the real benefit of making everything open? Well, one of the benefits, of course, we talked about other researchers and innovation, but a few years ago, SpringNature did a survey of people coming to our website to ask who you are. And we did this survey of people who stayed on the website more than about a minute because they were seriously reading the articles. And of course, we found out that about 57% of the people coming to SpringNature would be our core readers. So these are academics. These are people who are accessing from a university IP, and they were active in a role involving research. But perhaps more surprisingly, we also found that 43% were people that perhaps we didn't expect to be coming to the SpringNature website. So these were what we call their halo readers. So these are people that are perhaps working in companies or working in policy making, working in government, working, these are people who had a role where the research was important and interesting. So quite often working in hospitals, doctors working in hospitals, or scientists working in pharma and biotech industry that were coming to the website to read the research. But we also had a high proportion of the general public coming that were generally interested in the research and were looking to find hints and clues for their next big idea. They might have been patients that were trying to research their own diseases. And there are a lot of general readers that were reading this research. If we could go on to the next slide, please. And this is some data from the Australian consortium with CALL, which shows the breakdown between where this extra usage is coming from. So where we say that there is 6 times the amount of usage that's coming from open access articles, where does it come from? And we find that a significant amount of the usage, which is the blue portion, is coming from the IP ranges that we cannot identify as being our usual customers. So the red bar is access that's coming from IP ranges that we recognize as coming from within a university or within someone who has bought our content. The blue access is coming from other IP ranges that we can't identify. So this is what we think is coming from the halo usage. These are people that would not normally be able to access the articles and now being able to access the articles. And you can see that in countries like the United States, that access is about 3 to 4 times the amount. of the access that's coming from universities. So this is the impact that we see on Australian research through the CALL consortium of having made all of their articles open. We see a greater amount of access coming from countries like the United States and Germany and also China that wouldn't have been there if the research had been behind a paywall, because the customers in those, or the readers in those IP ranges are not normally customers. So this is what we think of as coming from the halo. And if I go to the next slide, please. And again, I'll just go through this very, very quickly. But looking at the experience of Japan, for those 10 universities that started our very first TA in 2023, we have seen that the number of gold OA articles actually increased 5 times in 2 years, which has meant that the average downloads of all the published articles have increased more than 3 times as well. So the transformative agreement provides a huge boost to the access and the usability of that research around the world. And if we go to my last slide, almost last slide, and I just wanted to point out also a case study that we did on Japanese research articles, looking at how this research is accessed in patents and in policy documents. And as you can see, as we go from 2019 to 2022, the articles that have been cited in patents are now 72% of those articles that were cited in patents were open access articles. And of course, there's a benefit to be cited by being published quickly. So if you wanted to be seen by people that are publishing patents, it's better to publish open access. Same thing for policy papers. When we look at the policy papers that were written by government departments setting policy, and this is across all fields in the social sciences as well as in the sciences like climate science, again, we see that in the last 4 years, most of the articles that have been cited in policy documents have been open. So there are real benefits from accessing the halo audience, not just the core researchers, in making articles open. And my last slide is a quick message. If we go on to the last slide there, sorry. Just a quick message from our CEO on why SpringNature really wants to build an open infrastructure for science. We really don't want to leave any country or any institution behind. And we really think that one of the best ways to do that and to achieve that is through transformative agreements that are led by libraries, because that is the best way for universities now to support their researchers to provide both access for reading and for publishing in a world which is increasingly interconnected and interdisciplinary. And that is a very, very important role that libraries continue to play. So that's, hopefully I didn't speak too long, but my talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tony, for that insightful and engaging presentation. We greatly appreciate you sharing your expertise and valuable perspective on SpringNature open access transitions. Once again, thank you, Dr. Tony. Now, we are excited to move forward with our next session, the Research Publication Forum on Digital Transformation and the Dynamic Landscape of Open Access Publishing. I would like to invite our distinguished panelists and moderator to take their seat in front as we prepare for an engaging and insightful discussion. Please welcome our panelists, Professor Dr. Sharidan Shafie, Dr. Tony, Madam Nur Asikin Mohamad, and our moderator for today, Associate Professor Dr. Rosnawira Abdul Wahab. We look forward to a lively and thought-provoking conversation on how digital transformation is shaping the future of open access publishing. Over to you, Dr. Ira.
Thank you very much, Madam Haliza. Assalamualaikum. I'm Associate Professor Dr. Rosnawira Wahab from the Department of Chemistry, Faculty of Science. So I will act as the moderator for today's forum. And first and foremost, I would like to introduce our panelists. The one on my left here is Professor Dr. Shafie, from my friend from the Department of Mathematical Sciences. So a quick introduction on Professor Sharidan. So he obtained his PhD in applied mathematics from UTM in 2005 and currently lecturing at the Department of Mathematical Sciences, Faculty of Science, UTM. He is an associate fellow at UTM Center for Industrial and Applied Mathematics, UTM Siam, as well as a member of the Malaysian Mathematical Sciences Society, Bersama. His main area of interest in research is mathematical modeling of boundary layer flow, heat, and mass transfer. He has supervised over 30 PhD and 16 MSc students and published over 250 articles, with 191 of them appearing in prestigious Web of Science journals. His key areas would be mathematics applied, multidisciplinary sciences, physics applied, thermodynamics, engineering multidisciplinary, and material science multidisciplinary, his subject of study. So moving on to the second panelist, we've heard Madam Haliza introduce him. Let me introduce our panelist again. Is Dr. Antoine Becquet, yeah, but he would like to be known as Dr. Tony. Quick introduction on Dr. Tony. It's actually a long, interesting, illustrious career. So let me flip here. All right. Dr. Tony is Australian by birth, and he did his Monbusho Fellowship at University of Tokyo from 1989 to 1991. He received his PhD from University of Tokyo, okay, in condensed matter physics, a physicist, in 1993, and a JSPS Fellow from University of Tokyo, 1994 to 1996. His undergraduate, though, he was from Australia, yeah, from Griffith University in Brisbane. So he is currently the Vice President, Institutional Sales of Japan, Southeast Asia, and Oceania for SpringNature, which is based in Tokyo, and has nearly 30 years experience in academic publishing industry in the Asia Pacific. He assumed the positions of Vice President, Institutional Sales, and Managing Director for SpringNature Japan in September 2015 after the creation of SpringNature. He is also responsible for all institutional sales in Japan, Southeast Asia, and Oceania, and oversees SpringNature's businesses in Japan. In 2019, Tony was awarded Sales Vice President of the Year of SpringNature, which recognizes his outstanding performance and valuable contribution. Prior to joining SpringNature Group, he was the Managing Director for Wiley in Tokyo between 1998 to 2001, and was the commissioning editor for Gordon and Breach between 1996 to 1998. But he has been in Japan ever since and still is in Japan. Right. For our third panelist, which many of us already know. So this is Madam Asikin Mohamad, who is now the Chief Librarian at University Technology Malaysia Library, which is since July 7, 2021. Her expertise and strength in library management and innovation are demonstrated by her extensive experience in key roles. So, like before assuming her current position, she served as the Deputy Chief Librarian for Planning and Development Division and spearheaded the operation of Perpustakaan Raja Zare Sofia between 2014 to 2017, where she successfully led strategic initiatives and ensured the library's efficient operation. From 2007 to 2014, she headed the Automation Development Division, showcasing her leadership in advancing library technology. With extensive experience in strategic planning for both the university and the library, Madam No Arsikin's specialties include quality management, library application systems management, digital transformation of libraries, procurement and processing of materials, and the management of institutional knowledge collections at UTM. She is also currently a member of the Malaysia Open Science Alliance, actively contributing to the advancement of open access initiatives and promoting broader accessibility to scientific research and data in Malaysia, and of course for UTM as well. Why don't we begin our forum, right, with the first question to panel one, Prof. Sharidan. How has digital transformation impacted the way researchers in sciences conduct, share, and publish their work?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rosnawira. A very long introduction, yeah, and welcome, Dr. Tony, and thank you, Puan Asikin, for the invitation. Yeah, well, the question is about digital transformation, right? And the impact of digital transformation. So I will talk in the capacity of researchers which are in UTM, yeah. And I think all of us have the same situation. Now, to compare with those like us, like me, myself, we transition between the before digital and after digital. Yeah, so I publish a lot before digital, and I think the same lah. Even after digital, even we need to pay for the open access, right? But we managed to hope to get that because the reason is one is the impact because we can say is about conduct, how to conduct, right? Conduct means whatever. Digital means whatever we using digital technologies is called a digital transformation. Yeah, whatever digital technologies, of course, lah computer, smartphone, yeah, smart TV, and everything is all about digital technologies. And once you use that digital technologies, is called research which using a digital transformation. So if we start, yeah, from every day, we are in UTM, for example. So everything now is digital. From the day you enter, you slide in, okay, and then you meet, maybe you come to class. Before this, we have online class. Sometimes we meet research, talking about discussion, everything using smartphone, all those research. So not only that the impact of digital is not something we can say, oh, this is digital transformation. No, it seemed to be like we didn't realize that whatever we did now is all digital transformation. So we cannot measure the impact because everything we did is the impact, and those impact is because of digital transformation. Yeah, everything you did, everything you deal, because nowadays we use WhatsApp, right, to communicate. And then when we have a discussion between our collaborators somewhere outside UTM, UPM, and so on, we use like Telegram, yeah, for example. And when we want to discuss about something, let's say on a topic that we deal with our collaborators, so we can use Google Drive. We can edit anything in the drive, whatever we discuss. And sometimes data we can share, we can use the data for our research. So everything is digital transformation. So if you say what the impacts, everything we did is the impact. That is the digital transformation. So if you want to say the impact of digital, yes, we cannot measure the impact. Everything now due to the impact of digital transformation, how to conduct our research. So this one. The second one is about the sharing, right? Yeah. Sharing, of course, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, whatever you deal with online is about research digital. And of course now sharing, for example, like I have a data, and those data I store in the cloud or in Google Drive, and I'm asking someone, which is my collaborative, to analyze it for me by using machine learning, for example. So there is a sharing of data. I no need to meet that one. Anybody who are in this world can access my Google Drive or my cloud, then can access my data. There is only one example. And I believe all of us now, yeah, using the same thing. Only that maybe is depend on your own capacity of your research. Yeah? So there is a sharing. This is one example only, yeah, that how that we share. Of course, if we realize whatever we share about any information that can be accessed by others people, that is the digital transformation. Yeah, I share, except for example, simple e-learning. Yeah, that is one type of sharing information. Many data, many info to many people. Yeah, many information to can be accessed by many people. That is digital transformation. Okay, so of course lah sharing. Yeah, so I think this three: conduct, sharing, and another one is publication. Yeah, of course lah publish. Yeah, starting from last time, I remember during my time, I need to post my script to long time ago. But sometimes we didn't realize that we changed the environment of working. Nowadays, we forget already what we did last time for the publication process. Now simple, go to website, look which journal that we attend to publish that related to the audience, the focus, and then we just submit online. And then when it comes to the editor receive, check, either accept or reject. Yeah, most of the time, yeah, reject. So it's all using online. And then if accept, distribute to the respective reviewers, maybe 7, 6 reviewers to check. And when come to me as a review, I review through the internet, through the phone, yeah. And those process until the paper is published, all using digital transformation. So for me, that among the impact that we as a researcher faces now. So if you say that the impact, everything we did now is the impact of digital information, and yet now maybe there are so many others apps that has been developed, and we don't know that most probably those make our research process is much easier. Yeah, sometimes we want to, because for me, digital information is seem to be like when we face a problem with the traditional way, then there must be someone to develop it to make it easier. And all those develop everything is based on the digital transformation. So for me nowadays, the impact of digital transformation is very big, and we have no doubt on the importance of digital transformation nowadays. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would say that I think the digital age has has expedited all the process, yeah, from publication, information sharing, and everything. Everything is fluid and accessible. Right. My next question is to Dr. Tony. How is SpringNature adapting its business model to accommodate the increased demand for open access publishing?
Thank you very much, Dr. Wahab, and thank you, Dr. Shafie and Madam Noor as well. It's a great pleasure to be on this panel. I think, as you saw from my earlier slides, SpringNature has been around since 1842. And I think for a lot of that history, we published everything in print, and we sent out the books physically and then the journals physically. And that's a very proud and long tradition. And when I was a scientist about 30 years ago, I was still going to the library every day and checking things in print. I was looking at the SCI index and trying to find all of the papers one by one. And as Dr. Shafie quite rightly said, the digital transformation has entirely transformed the way that researchers work today, even just 20 years later. They are born digital, they start their search, they make their hypothesis already in a digital world, and they expect to have access to all of the information, not just the information that their library holds on the bookshelves or perhaps in a repository. And I think SpringNature has really seen this change and adapted our business model quite fundamentally over the years. I remember when I was talking to editors trying to create new journals, even back in 2010, we were already talking about open access as being the best way to start a new journal, because it reached the biggest audience in the shortest amount of time. And rather than relying on libraries to find the funding to support a new journal, it would be the authors and the community of that journal that would support it through open access. And that was already 15 years ago. So in 2014, as I mentioned, SpringNature created the first transformative agreement with a group of libraries in the Netherlands, actually led by the Delft group. And that was a very strong innovation at that time. What it said was that rather than a library should simply purchase what used to be print copies and were now electronic copies, that funding would also be used to publish open access. And since that time, as you can sort of see, not just with SpringNature, but all other publishers, transformative agreements are now what libraries around the world are looking for, and this is what we aim to provide in a way that is sustainable. So one of the things that is of huge concern to us is with research output increasing every year there are more and more articles that people need to read. And on top of that, there are also preprints, and there are also lots of other things that people need to read. This is also another consequence of the digital transformation. There is so much more to do than before. So even if we make all of the research and all of the articles open, as a business, we really feel that our role going forward in the future is to help the researchers to filter and to look at how to find the best research most quickly and the research that's relevant to you. So I can see a further transformation beyond open access to where publishers are providing services for researchers to find access, trusted information quickly that helps accelerate their research. Thank you.
That is wonderful to hear in terms of that, because access to reliable information for research and so on, trusted information is very important. Yeah. So I think for the third panel, to Madam Ashikin, what is the role of academic library in play in supporting open access initiatives and promoting digital transformation in publishing?
Thank you, Dr. Rose. Actually, open access in UTM Library is not something new. It's been there for 20 years ago. We started in 2004. The one we come up with the first UTM IR, UTM Institutional Repository, whereby all our publication, university publication can be accessed freely and openly. And then in fact, in 2007 and 2000 till 2010, we achieved highest top 50 and top 100 in world repositories. And this is the first phase. For the second phase, we develop certain repositories that house from the other outstanding university repositories which align with our niche area. So for that certain repositories also, we have a good feedback from our customers, especially students, whereby when we check the number of accessing our repositories exceed 8 million per year. Okay, so the third one is the current one, whereby all the universities, public universities especially, are looking forward open access and a transformative agreement, which is quite new to all local public universities actually in Malaysia, not considering the Southeast Asia or the other countries. But in Malaysia, it's quite new. And with the effort from our consortium concept, we are trying to convince the public university to join this agreement, whereby this is the new trend. We have to involve it, so that actually to help the researchers to publish their publication in open access and increase the visibility of their research globally. That's right. So for digital transformation, I think it's same with others. Previously, we purchased in printed format, then we purchased in a lot in electronic format, and we have system whereby we can all our customer or users globally can access it anytime, anywhere, 24/7.
Thank you very much, Madam Ashikin. I think it's a very good idea if the library would consider TA, and it will be interesting to see the outcome of this TA
We are still
initiative.
working with a few publishers actually, but I have to say it's quite expensive. So
Yeah.
we still can't afford, but still negotiating on that. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam Sikim. So back to Prof. Sharidan. So for the second question, in your experience, could you share what are the biggest challenges in transitioning to open access publication?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rose. I think we all know the big challenge is the cost. Yeah, because open access nowadays, I believe, when we look at the invoice that we receive, if the article is, of course, agreement before should be right. Either we agree or not in open access. So I think the most important now, like we are developing countries, yeah. So and less developed countries surely has a big problem with the cost, yeah. And of course, open access is very good because it can be easy access by many people regardless of you are rich country or not. As long as you get the internet facilities, you're able to download the articles. But the point is, to publish in open access is only limited to those who have enough fund. So in poor country, for example, you are very good in academic, you are very, very good in doing research and so on, but you still need to go through process of traditional publisher. Yeah, because why? Because the constraint of the fund. So it seems to me like because of the cost, it seems to be like not balanced between the researchers in the developing countries, less developed countries, and poor countries. Because seem to be like those are in developing countries, industrial countries are able to publish is very good. Yeah, but that is a challenge lah. Right? But we can say that, of course, because of the open access, wherever we are, especially those in the medical and biologists, yeah, easily to know what is the most latest innovation on the drug to cure the disease, even in the country. Yeah, so the message is there, but to, let's say, for visibility, a good researcher, I think is a constraint. Only mostly we can say the very developed countries always publish all the time in the open access. So that is one. I think the second one is we have a perception that the quality of the articles. This is also something, yeah, because we can say that sometimes predatory journal, yeah, just for the sake of the money, for the sake of the publication, fast publication, very fast, yeah. And sometimes we have doubt either this article has been reviewed or not. And suddenly appear, and but we sometimes we also have doubt because this journal is under the Q1 or Q2. And we of course know that Q1, Q2, you need to go to a certain process of filtering to make sure that you always Q1 and Q2. So, but still have a perception of the quality of article. Sometimes we have doubt either because sometimes we read yeah? We read those articles, and so far in my field, I think those also, of course, we always encourage our students possible to look first in the Web of Science or Scopus, right? To get information, to do review and so on. But the perception of quality for the open access, I think still exists. So something need to do lah with this one. And I think the other one is because of the challenging because of this is not all, I believe, want to shift from open access because they are still secure with the fund from the subscribe. Yeah, so some traditional publishers still want keep their way of publish by using not open access, so means they are free. So I think there's a challenge also because they still don't want to go to the open because you mentioned just now we should go further for the open access, right? But there are some, I believe, publisher keep on a subscribe journal. So I think there are three big challenge lah for the open access journal at this moment. For this situation now, I think this is most three big challenge for me lah. What I think in UTM as well. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. When it comes to transitioning to open access money, the perception of paying, then you might have questionable issues of quality, and also when there is other option of free, we will go for that. That's what we researchers go do. If we can publish free, that's what we always do. I'm still there. It's okay. I think it takes a while, right? It takes a while. So for the second question for Dr. Tony, can you share some of the strategies that SpringNature is employing to ensure that there is sustainability and there is quality in the open access journals?
Thank you very much. Actually, Dr. Shafie gave me a very good 3 talking points, which I think I can use this opportunity to address because I think it answers the question. Question of cost is a very interesting one because if you think about the world of print subscriptions and even electronic access, the world was basically the cost was shared among all of the readers. And there are many, many more people reading and universities that read compared to universities that publish. In an open access world where every article carries a cost to publish, then the economics shift to the producers of the research rather than the consumers. And we have a lot fewer producers of research than we have people that need to read that research. So you might think that then that shifts the cost to, let's say, the rich nations of the world that produce most of the research. But of course, research is increasing everywhere. And this puts a country like Malaysia in a very challenging position because your research is increasing in both quality and volume. But you still need to read it. So if you like, the challenge from Malaysia is to join the club of the countries that can now both publish and read. And that requires special solutions that publishers are working on. So for example, in some journals, there are lower open access fees for certain countries, and SpringNature has that for some journals. Transformative agreements, though, are usually the best way to achieve the sustainability because it's taking existing funds and transforming as much of that as possible into funding research. The question, though, is that, is there enough funding in the library to achieve a full transformation? And I think, as you've probably guessed, without the help of the people who have research funding, that's going to be challenging. One of the statistics which we find everywhere in the world is that if you look at the percentage of funding that is supplied to actually doing the research, and that involves buying equipment, paying for the postdoctoral fellows, paying for the research, also for your reagents, all of that money that you write for a research grant. If you add all of that up compared with the funding that's given to the libraries, usually the libraries only get about 1% of the pie. Depends on which country you are at, but most I've ever seen is about 5%. So more than 20 times is gone to do the research than is to doing the process of telling everybody else about the research or communicating the research. But we would argue the research communication is one of the most vital parts of research itself. So since the cost is now more proportional to the number of articles, we do feel that there needs to be a contribution from the researchers themselves. And yes, if you've never been asked to contribute, it's difficult to say yes, because you think, okay, I'm asked to pay, let's say, $1,000, $2,000 US for every article I produce. But if you think how much money was spent to produce that article, if it's only read by a small number of people, is that money well spent? So to the third point there on the, well, to come back to the quality, I'll leave that to the last. But we mentioned that there is still the subscription model, and so it's free, so why should I pay? I think that's a very good point, and you will still see the subscription model maintained for some time. As you saw in the slides, 83% of the content you can access through a transformative agreement, you would have to pay for anyway. However, that is starting to change. It is starting to move, and as you can see globally, it's starting to shift away from that. And if you, this is 83% of the hybrid journals. We have full gold open access on top of that. That makes the number, the percentage much higher. But there's still a lot of research which is behind paywalls. I think for an individual researcher, you know who you want to read your research. When I was doing a researcher, I basically knew all of my friends, I knew my collaborators, I knew my competitors. So my collaborators, I send them a PDF of my research. I'm so proud of it. For my competitors, I say, look, I did this before you did. You know, now time for you to catch up. But I knew there was a small group of people that I cared about, and maybe I used ResearchGate or I used some other way to share the research to my small group. That is the core audience for your research. But individual researchers never really understand the bigger impact of their research until it becomes open, because they don't know who might be reading it that they don't know. And that is the data that we showed. It's the people who are writing patents, people in a small company that might take your idea and develop something for the future, a policymaker in government who reads your research about agriculture that then changes their mind about how the country should develop agriculture. That halo audience is what benefits the most from open access. And it means the university that produced the research and the country benefits much more than the individual researcher. So if you like, open access needs to be thought of more as a community effort, I think, rather than the benefit for you as an individual researcher. And that can be sometimes a difficult choice if you don't have the funding. And then on the third part about quality, that's extremely important. I think publishers like SpringNature, work very hard to educate researchers how to identify a predatory publisher and a predatory conference. I think a good way of putting it is that if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Like, please pay $1,000 and you will be accepted in 2 days. Anyone who has peer-reviewed a paper knows that never happens in the real world. So if it seems too good to be true, then it probably is. But it's very tempting for students and for people who feel they need a publication quickly to fall into that trap. And ultimately, it is a fraud. It is a waste of money that could be better used doing other things in a proper way. So really, people need to beware. But publishers like SpringNature are also not immune to other types of fraud like paper mills. Paper mills are where people will buy authorship in fake papers or sometimes even in real papers. And paper mills will target Q1, Q2 journals because if you're published in a Q1, Q2 journal, somehow the paper is worth more, right? So, and now we hear stories in Google Scholar of people advertising, we can increase the number of citations because we will cite your paper even if it has nothing to do with your research. So we write a paper, maybe a real paper or a fake paper, and we put in artificial citations for money. So as publishers, we need to work with the whole community, with universities, with researchers, to try to stop this fraudulent practice. And the main thing is to make sure that the incentives for doing so are removed. It is very much an arms race. We spend a lot of time. SpringNature has a team of more than 50 involved in research integrity, where we are using tools and human beings to check papers and check articles. I think people often say, why wasn't this picked up in peer review? I'm sure anyone who has done peer review noticed that your job as a peer reviewer is not to find fraud, it's to assess science. So we need to remove the incentives for doing this. But the quality is really, really important. And as I mentioned, access to trusted research is what drives forward science and research, not just access to everything.
Thank you very much for the answers to this sort of issue. But it is true, predatory, because even with so we look at like if it's paid, it tends to be predatory, and if you have to pay a lot, probably is. So actually something is a transition, and many of us are still learning, in identifying whether it's true or not. So to the second question to panel 3, how has the shift towards digital resources affected the way libraries manage and curate academic collections?
As we can see now, people are users are accessing our collection through their gadgets. So everything must be easy for them to access. So it should be in digital. So most of our budget goes to the purchasing of electronic resources and e-journals, databases, e-books, and etc. So with the digital collection, it is possible. It is possible for our users to access the collection 24/7. And of course, in processing the digital collection, we have the metadata, indexing, and so on, so that it's visible through our portal. And of course, if you subscribe or purchase to digital content, digital collection, digital resources, you are also bound to agreement licensing, which you have to renew every year. And it also involves budgeting and for the following year. And of course, licensing also plays the important part in managing digital collection. Okay, but in terms of services, interlibrary loan, for instance, is easier through online digital we share our collection through digital I'm trying to say is we share our digital collection through online, so it's easier and faster. So is some of other services that we've been given by the library also through digital that increase the speed of accessing and retrieval of information by our customer, by our users. So I think digital resources helps a library to move forward a bit in an efficient manner rather than print the collection in printed materials. So with the efficiency of our portal, users are able to access all the related resources regarding to their needs 24 hours, 24/7 without any downtime and etc. So I think it's very efficient for library to handle the digital collection rather than the printed collection.
Yes, it's very true. Everything when it's digitalized and everything is quick access. And I think for those who are like students and researchers, and some of us will like work like around the clock, work some from day, from home, they can access it from home. It's really, really useful. So I think we look forward to seeing that the UTM library is also expanding their services from the aspect from the digital part, rapid access and so on. It seems that we have 10 more minutes and we're moving to the Q&A session already. So, so the questions will be read from the, oh, there is a question there, right? So it is from Prof. Okay, so does the library support in publication fee for WOS Q1 publication? If yes, kindly share the details. Yes, it's from Professor Faro.
Like last time, when I was in England many years ago, in 1990s, when my professor wanted to submit article, so he has to pay for a page. Many years in 1990s in England. But now we have to pay. But now we have also to pay open access, like $3,000. What's the rationale of charging that high? Because like last time, they said because of printing colors, and then they have to make into a books and send to the library, like a British library, and send to the universities. But now when they charge $3,000, for instance, for gold open access, so where does the money goes? I mean, it's too high for me. I mean, what's the rationale of charging $3,000 compared to maybe $100 to $100? That's my question, especially open access fees. Thank you.
Maybe I can take that one. Yes. Right. All right. Thank you, Professor. So yes, page charges that were often charged by academic societies. I think that represents the cost or defraying part of the cost for the production of the journal. And in many ways, article processing charge also covers those basic costs that we would normally recover from subscription. Now, article processing charges vary depending on the journal, but I think you can see even for non-profit organizations, where by definition there is no profit, you're seeing article publishing charges at around $1,000 to $2,000. So I think what we can sort of say is that even if you try to do this in the most cost-effective way, the cost of publishing is around that much per article. Now, what services do publishers provide, apart from administrating services like peer review, managing the website, producing the article and all of the links and all of the things that come into that? I think one clue, as you can see, of what is the difference and the value that publishers add is the difference between a version of record that a publisher produces and the author manuscript that you might find in a repository. If you think about all of those differences that comes from, linking of citations and also all of the checking and all of the improvement that is made to be the manuscript, that is what goes into your article processing charge. Now, different journals have different level of charges. For example, it's well known that the nature journals have a very high, nature journals published by SpringNature have a very high APC. And one of the reasons for that is that only accepted authors will pay the APC, but the work for the publisher happens in many cases for all of the authors that submit. So for the cases of nature journals, only 5% of authors are successful. So for every 20 authors that submit and that papers get looked at and reviewed and go through peer review and go through the process of being analyzed, there's only one successful author that pays the APC. And remember, the journal has no other method of getting funding. So if you like, those accepted authors are subsidizing all of the unsuccessful authors. And this is one of the sort of quirks of high impact titles. So what you generally find is that APCs are higher for journals that have high submission rates, but lower acceptance rates, because that is just proportional to the amount of work that's being done. I think one way of thinking of APCs, though, is what is the benefit that it brings you to make your paper open? So let's say there are 6 times as many people who are viewing your article if it's open compared to it's closed, and your APC costs $3,000. So let's say generally your article would have maybe 500 views. Now it has 3,000 views. So 2,500 views, you paid $3,000. That is like $1 for every person who looks at it. That's another way of thinking about how the APC helps to expand. I think the question is, yes, it's very expensive, but who should be paying for that? Where should that money come from? One of the best things about transformative agreements is that most of the articles are actually funded from existing funding that's coming through the library. And usually the additional funding is not very much that's required because the existing funds are being transformed to support that process. So the cost to the author should be minimal or zero, because it should be coming through the existing funding from the funder or the library or the government or who else is paying for the transformative agreement. But it's a very interesting question on how to think about it. I like to think about all of those extra eyeballs, a bit like advertising. You're paying $1 for every person who's watching it. Maybe that person is very important to you.
May I add?
Yes.
Actually, the library also is working with the publisher to read and publish. Read meaning that you have to pay for the subscription, and publish is transformative agreement whereby library also supporting APC for the researchers. But at this moment, it's still ongoing, still under discussion within the concept and public universities. It seems that the APC is quite high and still can't affordable by the library. So that's why we're still looking at it, because we need the participation of other public libraries as well to join the TA. We cannot go alone. We cannot go alone. We have to work together with other public libraries from UAE, other 20 UAEs as well. Okay, and the second one, I would like to also announce that we also support, library also supporting APC for students, PhD students next year, inshallah, through cooperation with Yayasan Bank Rakyat. And YBR is giving us about 200,000 for PhD students to publish in any outstanding journals with minimum 2,000 to 10,000 per APC for one student. So hopefully, inshallah, this MOU will be signed next year. Okay.
Thank you very much for the update, Madam Asikin. Can I have a a question that from what Dr. Tony mentioned earlier, the reason that the APC, like from like SpringNature, even like Elsevier, when it comes to OA, it's because 1 out of 20 authors are paying. Let's say if like SpringNature or Elsevier goes 100% open access, will we be expecting the fees to go down since everybody is paying? Would that be the future? Because since everybody is paying,
That would only work if everyone was accepted. But we know that lots of people submit and are rejected for many different reasons, sometimes quality, sometimes scope, but there's still work to go for those articles. I think there are ways that, you know, if a paper is resubmitted to another article, to another paper, and sometimes that is within the same publisher, that, you know, there's no extra cost or something, but there's now no cost for submitting an article. It's only when you are successful in getting accepted.
so let's say if now if like the Hindawi and MPPI, if you see the trend is that everyone with their articles accepted, they have to pay like up to 16,000 like journal publishing, like 16,000 ringgit, 18,000 ringgit. But the APC goes out every year. It goes up. It's not coming down. So in terms of SpringNature, so if you were to go like transition into full OA, so there's if like everybody's accepted article is you know, everybody's paying, would there be a future that the APC is lower? You know, I mean something that.
I think if there are more articles around the world and there is a scale merit, and there are advantages for being larger publisher, that you can spread that cost around more people, it is possible, yes, the APC will go down. But what we are also seeing is an increasing number of submissions, an increasing number. And at the moment, one point I want to make is the contribution that libraries make is extremely important. And even if the world went to 100% open access, the contribution that libraries have made still needs to be made, because through transformative agreements, you are supporting a lot of articles. I think if libraries stopped funding open access through transformative agreements, the cost would be even have to be borne by more authors individually. So yes, I think there are ways that more authors will spread the cost around, but I also think for a lot of smaller publishers that don't have that many authors, that might also be challenging. So yeah, it's you know, as we see more and more research going out there, the cost of managing that is also increasing every year by inflation, often by inflationary sort of methods. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So do we have any other question from the audience? I think we have time for one more only, right? I think one more last question. On the TV, okay. How can libraries in partnership with SpringNature better support researchers at UTM in navigating open access publishing, particularly in terms of funding and compliance with open access mandates?
Actually, for the library, a partnership with SpringNature through transformative agreement, whereby when we the subscription fee, we the subscription fee will be going down and accommodate to TA, transformative agreement fee. But for the in order to do that, we need support. We need support from the other university as well, and also we need to discuss further with the SpringNature as well to reduce the TA as well. Or maybe we can find another solution. Let's say reduce the subscription fee, but put it more on the TA if possible. But we have to really analyze the usage of our database and the number of researchers that publish in SpringNature, then we can accommodate whether we reduce the price, the subscription fee, but we go more for the TA. Right?
Thank you very much, Madam. No, I would also note that we are working very hard with the concept group to find a solution, not just for UTM, but for all of the research universities in Malaysia, because the scale is very different from one single university to all of the universities. And if we are successful, there will be a big benefit for the smaller universities that will be able to access everything that we publish, as the read access, as well as the ability to publish. I think there are different ways that we are looking at. So one of the models that we have used in Japan, for example, is partial transformation. So to go part of the way to fund some of the articles, but not all of them, and to gradually build that up as more funding becomes available. And then, of course, working with the research side, we can choose which articles are supported and which ones should be up to the author to fund. It's really important to remember that subscription access or not having to pay to publish still exists in this transition period. And this is one good reason why we shouldn't move too fast, perhaps, because having the ability to publish is the most important thing. Being open is very important, but the first thing we need is that people are able to publish. So there might still be, for some time, the subscription route. It's not as good, not as many people can access, but at least you can publish. That is the first priority. So we trying to find a way, but we're very happy with the partnership. And I think we're making a lot of rapid progress this year.
And of course, the trend is for research publication from RU are quite high compared to other universities, 15 universities. So it's sometimes quite difficult also to suggest a very flexible TA agreement to all. So that's why there's still an agreement, still discussion being done to make TA achievable to all.
One question. When we send publication to a SpringNature journal, so some of the university in the world, they are membership to this SpringNature. I'm not sure how come this university in Europe or British university, I don't know, some, they are membership of this SpringNature, so that the researcher from that university is like free of charge to send publication. So how come if UTM wanted to be like that, to be same like European university, to be a membership of this kind of SpringNature, or I don't know. So is it possible?
So all universities in the UK are covered through an agreement with the JISC consortium and SpringNature that publishes all of their articles open access at no charge to the researchers. But it is funded through the libraries and through funding provided by the UK government. So the money is coming from somewhere. Let me give you a counter example. If you're in China, you will never get your APC published, paid for by your library or by your university. You will pay it from your own research funds, because in China, there is no such arrangement as you find in the UK. So, but I will say transformative agreements are not easy. In Southeast Asia, there are very, very few. So there is a real opportunity here for the concept group to create a new model for Southeast Asia at conditions that are appropriate for Southeast Asia. So we really are very, very keen to work together and to come to some solution. We understand it's challenging, and we understand we need a lot of cooperation, but also researchers need to understand that they are part of the progress. If you wish to have the same benefits as a researcher in the UK, you might need to contribute some of your research funding to the library to make it happen. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Tony and Madam Asikin, for the insight with regards to publication and open access. In fact, I think we have made available a wealth of information with regards to open access publication, and I see the future is bright, but we need to make a lot of changes and perhaps give and take with regards to funding and so on. So we'll see maybe in the next 5 to 10 years how it goes. And I hope it goes favorably to us researchers here in Malaysia. So I would like to thank you, Professor Sharidan, Dr. Tony, and Madam Asikin for being the panelists today. And thank you to the audience who have been listening. Okay, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you to our panelists and moderator for an insightful discussion and to the audience for your participation. Before we conclude, we would like to invite our Chief Librarian, Madam Nur Asikin, to present a token of appreciation to our distinguished panelists and moderator for their valuable contributions to today's forum. Madam Nur Asikin, sorry, could you please? Please welcome our first panelist, Professor Dr. Sharidan Shafie. Next, Dr. Tony. Our moderator is Associate Professor Dr. Rosnawira. We kindly ask Madam Nur Asikin to remain for a moment.